Hello there, I'm Brianna Keeler in for Brooke Baldwin. At any moment, the White House briefing is set to begin, and it's expected that officials will be put to task about what is considered the most serious and painful part of being a president, consoling the families of those killed in action. President Trump is now embroiled in a new controversy about what he said to the widow of Sergeant LaDavid Johnson, one of 4 soldiers killed in that ambush in Niger. And the other big story that we're following, NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell expected to speak any moment now, addressing the league's position on protests during the national anthem. We're going to bring you the commissioner's response. First, this is the video of Myesha Johnson mourning over her husband's casket. And before this heartbreaking moment, as she was traveling to greet his remains, the sergeant's widow received a call from President Trump. Democratic Congresswoman Frederica Wilson, who's known the slain soldier since his childhood, said she was in the car listening to the call on speakerphone when it came through.
I didn't hear the whole phone call, but I did hear him say, I'm sure he knew what he was signing up for, and but it still hurts. And I asked them to let me speak with him. And the master sergeant said, no, you can't speak with him. But I said, but I want to speak with him because I was livid.
To speak out to the widow, how did she hear it? What was her response?
She was crying. She broke down. And she said, he didn't even know his name. So
did you hear that part? Did you hear the part where they left the impression that he didn't know his name?
She heard the part that he didn't know his name. I'm not trying to prove anything with the president. So the president evidently is lying because what I said is true. I have no reason to lie on the president of the United States with a dead soldier in my community. I have no time. I have no motive.
Now, the president hit back. He challenged the congresswoman for proof.
Didn't say what that congresswoman said. Didn't say it at all. She knows it. And she now is not saying it. I did not say what she said. And I'd like her to make the statement again because I did not say what she said. I had a very nice conversation with the woman, with the wife, who sounded like a lovely woman, did not say what the congresswoman said. And most people aren't too surprised to hear that.
What's the proof, Mr. President?
Let her make her statement again, and then you'll find out.
That you said this.
Okay, let her make her statement again, and then you'll find out.
Joining me now is CNN White House correspondent Sarah Murray. So, Sarah, has the congresswoman responded to the president's latest comment?
Well, Brianna, the congresswoman did respond on Twitter. I'm going to read you what she said. She's standing by her account, says, I still stand by my account of the call between Donald Trump and Myesha Johnson. That is her name, Mr. Trump, not the woman or the wife. Now, a local television affiliate also caught up with the congresswoman. She said the president was crazy. She said the president was insensitive. It's also worth noting that Sergeant Johnson's mother also confirmed to CNN roughly the congresswoman's account of this call and said it was very accurate. Obviously, this is all coming in the broader context of how the president has responded to this ambush that occurred in Niger. He was asked originally by me why it took him 2 weeks to say anything. Why
Sarah, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. We're going to come back to you, but let's listen in to Roger Goodell, commissioner of the NFL, talking about protests.
We are confident that Dallas will raise that bar even further. So I'm happy to introduce Charlotte Jones Anderson, who is going to give her view of what to expect in Dallas. Again, the ownership was very supportive, and we're all very excited to be going to Dallas next April for the draft. Charlotte.
On behalf of the Dallas Cowboys, the city of Dallas, the city of Arlington, and the city of Frisco, we are so excited that the NFL has given us this opportunity to host the draft in April of next year. And we have had so many great civic leaders in Dallas and across from Arlington and beyond that have really done a lot of hard work here, hopefully giving a lot of ideas to the staff at the NFL, to Peter and his team. And we really think we have come up with an incredible idea and concept that will really make AT&T Stadium shine, but also will will deliver a unique experience that is unlike anything that you have seen thus far at the NFL Draft. But I think this is what the draft process is all about. It allows the cities to show their unique personality and hopefully invite not only fans from all over our region in Dallas and the Metroplex and beyond, but from those from out of state, and that we welcome them to come to Dallas, to come to Arlington, to AT&T Stadium, to show their fandom and be a part of the draft in April. So you'll see a little bit different variation of it when you get there. A lot of those surprises are in store and will be released throughout the next few months. But again, we'd like to thank all of those who worked hard on this, but most importantly, the NFL for giving Dallas and the city of Arlington and AT&T Stadium the opportunity to host the draft. Thank you.
Any questions for Charlotte before she goes? Because I'm sure she doesn't want to stay for the rest of the show.
Yes, it's all you.
Okay, I'm sure you know. Okay, so we had a very productive set of meetings in New York here over the last couple of days. We had reports from various committees, including the competition committee. Very excited about the season that we have ongoing right now. We reviewed the 6 weeks that we've played to date and the margin of victory. We talked about the penalties per game. We talked about our game presentation and the changes that we've made and how that's worked. Talked about the focus on officiating. All very positive very positive feedback on the game. We also spent a great deal of time talking about our partnerships. We extended a partnership and expanded a partnership with Ticketmaster that we think will be very fan-friendly, that will give our fans a better opportunity to buy tickets on a secure basis and give that to them on greater platforms, which we think will be very positive. And as always, we had a report on our health and safety and our initiatives there and the impact that that's having on our game. Lastly, we had a special visitor today. We had the Commissioner of the NYPD, Jimmy O'Neill, and his Chief of Police, Terry Monahan. We have been, and I specifically have had conversations with them for several months. So this has been quite a while in the making to try to understand how we can continue to expand the relationships between our clubs, our players, our communities, and the NFL. And he was very helpful in giving us insight into what their initiatives are here with the NYPD, initiatives that are going on in other parts of the country, of which I saw firsthand down in Miami as an example last week and saw in Philadelphia recently. The relationship between the players and our communities and our law enforcement is very important to us. So that was very helpful. And yesterday, as you know, I made a brief comment about, came down to see you. I'm sure there'll be more questions about our meeting with the players and owners yesterday. We also spent a great deal of time with our owners alone today, discussing our efforts with our players. I would tell you that there's a great deal of support for the efforts that our players have identified. Not only support, but a recognition these are important issues for our communities. They're American issues and certain things that we really want to, as clubs and as a league, want to not only support, but also be a part of and try to help lead with our players. I think those are the key issues. I would tell you, though, just on one other issue that we spent a great deal of time talking about this morning was how much we believe everyone should stand for the national anthem. That's an important part of our policy. It's also an important part of our game that we all take great pride in. And it's also important for us to honor our flag and to our country. And we think our fans expect us to do that. And so that is something that we continue to focus on this morning, but really talking a lot about the opportunity that exists with our players to try to go and really make a difference in our communities in a positive way. So I'll let you take questions.
Your statement yesterday, the president this morning tweeted that both you and the league have disrespect for the country. Is he wrong about that, and if so, why?
Well, as I just said, we respect our country, respect our flag, we respect our national anthem. I think you look at our clubs and what they do on a daily basis. You think we look at our players and what they do and how they participate in that. We all feel very strongly about our country and our pride and we're going to continue to do that.
How can you allow the president to bully the National Football League in January 8, 2015, on May 11, he himself expressed support for flag burning? So it doesn't make any sense.
Listen, you know, I understand we're focusing on what we can do and what we should be doing as an NFL. I think we have a great opportunity here with our players to really work together and to try to help and make differences in our community. Things that we all believe are necessary to do. And that's what we're going to continue to do.
In the game operations manual, the players should be on the field for the national anthem, should stand at attention, hold their helmets in their hands. It's not a rule, but it's in the policy. So why not make it a rule? Since fans seem to want it, ratings seem to be down, why not make it a rule?
Well, I think one of the things we need to keep a focus on is, again, we believe that our players should stand for the national anthem. That's an important part of our game and our moments, and we believe in that. I think we also have to keep focus on this. We have about 6 or 7 players that are involved with this protest at this point. And this is something that what we've tried to do is deal with the underlying issue and understand what it is that they're protesting and try to address that matter. And so let me finish if you can. So the important thing for us is to be able to do that and take that opportunity to make real differences in our community. And that is really what's going to ultimately be the important aspect for us long term, because this is a long term issue. We need to make sure we do that in the right way.
Would you agree that the image is suffering because of it?
I understand where our fans feel about this issue, and we feel the same way about the importance of our flag, about the importance of patriotism, and I believe our players feel that way. They will state to you, and they have stated to everyone publicly, they are not doing this in any way to be disrespectful to the flag, but they also understand how it's being interpreted, and that's why we're trying to deal with those underlying issues.
Thank you, Roger. Jim Trotter here, ESPN.
I don't know where you are, Jim.
Right here, in the middle,
yes.
Right here. You said you want the players to stand, and there's been no change to the game operations manual. My question is, what happens if an owner who still feels that he can discipline a player for taking a knee? What response will we see from the league if that were to happen?
Well, Jim, we just had 2 days of conversations with our owners, of which, you know, this was a fair amount of the conversation. And I think our clubs all see this the same way, that we want our players to stand. We're going to continue to encourage them to stand, and we're going to continue to work on these issues in the community. We'll address issues. I can't deal with hypotheticals right now. We'll deal with those issues if they come up. But for us right now, that's our focus.
Mark Maskey.
Roger, over here.
Yeah.
At this point, what have your sponsors and the network said to you about this issue, and what do you feel the effect is on your business right now of this entire?
Yeah, Mark, we had a report on that too. Listen, we know how important this is to our sponsors, our partners, our licensees. It's important to us also. So we all share that, and we certainly are in great contact with them. We understand the issues. We want to make sure they understand our perspective of what we're doing. And in fact, if they can help us, we want them to help us in those issues. But all of this is part of the ongoing effort and understanding one another and making sure that we do the right thing in our communities and the right thing to support our players, but also do the right thing to make sure we get back to football. And in the meantime, people understand how important our country is and how important it is to make sure that we're doing things the right way to honor our country.
Byron Barnett from WHDH in Boston. What is your reaction to the lawsuit filed against the NFL by the Aaron Hernandez family and their allegation that the NFL doesn't inform the players about the risks of CTE?
Listen, this is a matter of litigation, so that's something that's going to work its way through the litigation. I think there's been a great deal of focus on this issue of brain trauma. We've been through a great deal of litigation on this issue and settled a major case on concussion, so we'll let the lawyers handle that and deal with it. Yes.
Roger, Ron Mott, NBC News.
I'm sorry, you guys, I can't see you.
Hi,
yes.
Roger, Ron Mott, NBC News.
Yes.
When you talk about supporting your players, what form or forms will that take? Because some people reasonably presume that if players felt that this league were truly on their side and supporting them in these causes and these concerns, that they would not take a knee. So how is this going to manifest itself going forward? Is the league willing to put the shield on the line to get into some sticky political and social debates?
Okay, but we're not afraid of the tough conversations. That's what we're having with our players. That's what we had yesterday, to make sure we understand one another and understand where they're coming from. And I think out of those discussions, they understand that the owners and the NFL really do care about their issues and what we can do to make the communities better. And so I think that's what dialogue's all about, and listening and understanding, so that we can get that kind of understanding between different parties. And that's what is complex about this, but that's why it's also really important to do, because I think that's where real change really happens, and that's the opportunity for us in our communities. We've had discussions with them for over a year, and I think we have a very good understanding of the types of things that they're interested in, how they can get support from the NFL to do that, and we want to do that. And that could be in legislative matters, that can be in the community with, can we participate in ride-alongs and try to make sure we understand what's going on in different communities across the nation. Because the problems in one market are different than the problems in another market. And so that involves the clubs and the players getting together and making sure we truly understand what's going on in those markets. And that's where we see a real impact.
All right, Roger Connell, McShane with the Fox Business Network. And I do want to ask you a business-related question to the league. One of the things we've seen in the polling this week, Gallup had numbers that showed the popularity of pro football started to come down, but they also showed there's a big political divide. Whereas, Republicans identifying as pro football fans down 15%, Democrats only 3%. So it doesn't directly speak to the Anthem protests, but what's your reaction to those numbers, and what, if any, steps can be taken to reverse that trend?
Well, we believe doing the right thing is what you ultimately have to do. And I think listening to our players, understanding our players, trying to, looking to get into politics, what we're looking to do is continue to keep people focused on football.
Commissioner, you
so
said,
people come.
Commissioner, you've been talking about, you said,
yes.
Jason.
Ma'am, just a second.
Thank you. Commissioner, as you said, you've been in discussions now for over a year, more discussions over the past day and a half or so. Realistically, can you tell us and tell the American people how closer you are today to resolving this?
Well, I think the fact is that we have about a half a dozen players that are protesting. We hope, and we're going to continue to work to try to put that at zero. That's what we'd like to do. But we want to make sure that we're understanding what the players are talking about, and that's complex. And we've taken the time, I personally have taken the time to go on those ride-alongs and to go and figure out what are the things in our communities that our players are expressing. And our clubs have a much better understanding of that from the meetings over the last several weeks, to hear directly from those players and do the tough work to try to understand what is it we need to accomplish together. And that's what I think is really the opportunity and what's really happening. So, yes, Judy, I see that. I can't hear you, Judy. I'm sorry.
Roger, did you come out of the meetings with the owners with an understanding that teams that have indicated they would discipline their own players for not standing will not discipline them?
No, we didn't discuss that. It wasn't necessary. We had a real focus on making sure that all of our teams understood the kind of dialogue that took place, the kind of things that they were interested in getting support from them. And there was complete support for the NFL, each club supporting their players, and continuing the dialogue that they've had on the club level. I would tell you there's unprecedented conversations and dialogue going on between our players, between our owners, between our club officials, between the league, and that is a really positive change for us, and we think ultimately is going to pay dividends.
You've talked a lot about having productive meetings with the players. You personally, do you understand what they're protesting, and can you explain your understanding of that?
Yes, they're very clear about it, and they're actually incredibly knowledgeable, articulate, and they spent the time to go into the communities and talk about that. And so they really truly understand it. They're talking about criminal justice reform, whether it's bail reform, whether it's talking about sentencing, mandatory sentencing. They're talking about changes that I think will make our communities better, that there is bipartisan support for across our nation and that need focus. They're talking about what we can do to support them to effectuate that legislative change. And that's, again, very, very positive. They're talking about equality issues, making sure that we're doing everything we possibly can to give people an opportunity, whether it's in education or economic, and what we can do to try to effectuate that. And we believe with the players that we can help them, we can support them, and those are our issues, national issues, American issues, that are all important to deal with.
Was there
Roger.
Last question.
Roger, hey, two-part question here. Number one, have you communicated?
You're taking two questions?
Do you mind? Have you at all communicated with President Trump? Do you have any plans to communicate with President Trump? Second question is a football question. Pace of play. How happy are you with just the fact that it seems like the games are going quicker this year?
Yeah, I have not. To your first question, to the second question, we're very pleased with the pace of game changes. We've seen, in particular, what I call the double ups, and that bother me so much on the commercial format. We've seen, I think it's close to a 90% reduction in that this year, which I think is good for our fans. I think it's good for the experience of watching an NFL game, whether you're in the stadium or on television or on another platform. And we said all along, this wasn't about reducing the length of games, it was the pace of the game. And so the 40-second clocks, as an example, that we put in after the point after touchdown and after the touchdowns have had a real impact. Centralizing replay and bringing the Surface tablet to the sideline so the official can do it. All of that's sped up what we consider downtime, time that's not, we don't believe is attractive to our fans. So we're happy with it. It's only 6 weeks, we've got a long ways to go, but we're continuing to see what we can do to keep pushing that, because we believe that's good for the experience. Okay? Thank you.
All right, NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell there holding a press conference in the middle of what is a huge controversy involving the NFL and players who are protesting racial injustice and kneeling during the national anthem. He said the players should stand for the national anthem and that football fans expect it. But he seemed pretty vague on how that's going to be enforced. We have a lot to talk about here. My panel joining me now to unpack all of this, starting with Christine Brennan, CNN sports analyst, USA Today sports columnist. What was your big takeaway?
I really think that Roger Goodell did a pretty good job of being able to walk a tightrope between the issue of standing and the demands from the president and this constant background noise, if you can call it that, from a president of the United States, the constant noise that they're hearing from him and the players. And I think when he said this is unprecedented, that this is the kind of conversation that's never happened before in the NFL, Brianna, I think that is an accurate statement. And that's a very positive statement. Did he dodge questions? Absolutely. Did he not answer fully? Our journalists there, sitting there saying, wait a minute, that wasn't the answer. That wasn't even an answer to my question. Of course. But the big takeaway is he repudiated Donald Trump. He refused to bow to the pressure of Trump, saying that they must stand. The word should, they should stand, is the word that Roger Goodell has used all the way through this. And it's the wording in the language for the guidance for the players. It's the rules, and they still are the rules. The word is should stand, and Donald Trump doesn't like that. I expect there'll probably be another tweet soon. But Roger Goodell, I think, did a fine job of trying to navigate a very, very difficult issue.
And Christine, as he walked that tightrope, he was pretty vague about whether owners should punish players. He was asked about a meeting that he had with them, if that was going to happen on an individual club basis. He said it wasn't something that they needed to discuss. What'd you make of that?
Right. Well, that means that they're not going to punish players. And there was a question about what would he do if a team did punish a player, and he did not answer that question. So the takeaway there is the players would not be punished. And you know, he said there are about a half dozen players, Brianna, who are taking a knee or otherwise protesting. That number is higher than that. So I think Roger Goodell got that number wrong. Might be trying to minimize the situation.
Sure.
Clearly, it is a very small percentage. If the number is 15, if it's 25, 30, and of course, how do we interpret that? Taking a knee definitely is seen as a sign of protest. But what about locking arms, which the players have said is a sign of protest? Then it's way more than 6 or 7. But Goodell clearly wants to do that because he is walking a very fine line. And again, no sympathy for him. But with Donald Trump roiling the waters, and that's all that this is. If Donald Trump doesn't do what he did in Huntsville nearly 4 weeks ago, this is not happening. So in a way, Trump getting involved is actually going to lead to some good change within the community. As Roger Goodell said, they really do seem to care about that. And I take him at his word on that.
Nia Malika Henderson, what is the president going to think about what he likely just heard?
Well, you know, we'll have to see. I mean, does he see this for what it is, which I think is actually a defeat? Roger Goodell isn't towing the line, isn't listening to Donald Trump in terms of what Donald Trump said that the league should do, right? That they should bench players, they should fine them, they should get them off the field if they mount this kind of protest. So that'll be interesting to see what the takeaway is. I thought also what was interesting here was Roger Goodell essentially saying that these are American issues that the players are protesting about, right? The issue of criminal justice reform, the issue of bail reform. Never said the word police brutality, which I thought was really interesting, sort of dodge there. I mean, there are many things that he didn't say, as Christine Brennan talked about there. But that was interesting. I mean, sort of saying that this isn't just a black problem. This isn't just in inner city communities. It's a real American problem that the league now wants to address. But at the same time, he also said we don't want to get into politics. We want to get back to football. It's going to be very hard to do those types of things, right? If you're talking about legislation, which at some point Roger Goodell talked about, you are going to have to put the shield on the line, as one of the journalists talked about there. So it'll be interesting to see what this next phase is for the NFL, a league that has dealt with sticky situations and controversial situations before, with domestic violence and domestic abuse, and also with the sort of CTE charges and problems that are out there as well. So, but all in all, I think Trump, you know, there was a question of whether or not he would win this culture war. It seems at this point that the league is drawing a line in the sand and not giving the W to Trump.
Paul Rykoff, you're the founder and the CEO of the Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. Thanks for being with us and lending really an important perspective here, and that's the perspective of veterans, because the president has said that this is, even as players say it's about racial injustice, the president has said, no, this is disrespectful to the flag. This is disrespectful to the troops. Where is the divide among veterans?
Well, I think it's a very complex issue that really divides veterans on all levels. I mean, what we heard when we polled over 8,000 veterans and troops, most of all, is that they don't agree. There's tremendous diversity. They're not a monolithic group, but they are paying attention. There are some trends. They worry about being politicized. This is not really a veterans issue. So when we asked them what was important in America, this didn't even rank in the top 5. It were things like, you know, ISIS and hurricane support. So they don't view it as a veterans issue. We don't own the flag. America owns the flag, and we've been really thrust into this argument in a way that has politicized things. But the NFL does have a problem on their hands here. This is political. It doesn't look like the president's going to let it go. It's probably going to go all the way through the Super Bowl and maybe beyond. And some veterans are upset. 39% of the veterans we polled said they're not watching the NFL because of this. Most veterans support the right to free speech, and they understand that's important, but many of them, you know, wouldn't kneel themselves. So it's complicated and it's diverse, but it's not just a veterans issue, and I think that's important for all Americans to understand. We're just one voice in this national discussion, an important one, but not a monolithic one.
All right, guys, stand by for me, because we are moments away from the White House briefing as President Trump is saying that a lawmaker is lying about his phone call to the widow of a soldier killed in Niger. We'll be back with that in just a moment. While we're things shaking here in Washington, we're waiting there for the White House briefing, and we have some breaking news, because that bipartisan health care deal, the one that's not even 24 hours old, has already, quote, stalled out. That is according to the third-ranking Republican in the Senate, John Thune. I want to bring Nia Malika Henderson and Gloria Borger back now. I mean, Gloria, wow. This is amazing in a way, because we heard that they had this deal yesterday. The president weighs in, seems to support it. Then he has this evolution where he seems to not support it. And now John Thune is saying this is stalled out.
Right. I mean, it gives you whiplash, because it's within the space of 24 hours where the president said, you know, that sounds like a good idea, after they had reached a bipartisan agreement. And then I think what really occurred is that conservatives let it be known that this is not something that they could sign on to, that they think that Lamar Alexander didn't get enough out of the Democrats, that he gave away the store. And I think that the White House began to hear this, and there are now people saying there isn't enough market reform in this for them, et cetera, and you heard the president this morning, he's saying he doesn't want to support a big enrichment of the insurance companies. So within the span of 24 hours, we have gotten from I was for it, and now I'm against it.
But Nia, it's not as if when this agreement was come to by Democrats and Republicans, which would preserve cost-sharing subsidies for a couple of years, it's not as if the president at the time where he said he was on board didn't understand that those are subsidies that would go to insurance companies to help people afford health insurance.
Right. I mean, that's what's so puzzling about it, right? He had been railing about these subsidies and pulling them away from insurance companies because he has claimed that it's a bailout for insurance companies and their stock prices have gone up as a result. And then he seems to join on with Alexander and Patty Murray to this deal. I mean, the question is, what did he know and when did he know it? If you listen to what Alexander has said, that the president was party to a lot of the conversations about this deal. But I think it gets to what we know about this president, and that is to say that he isn't a policy wonk. He isn't somebody who's read in, who's studying these issues, studying, kind of chapter and verse what all this means. But at the same time, in some ways, he almost wouldn't have to be that read in on this. I mean, if you look at just sort of the top lines of this, it was restoring of these payments to health insurers that he had just said days ago that he wasn't interested in doing. But this is, I think, the kind of whiplash you get with a president who really just wants to make a deal. You don't even necessarily know what has to be in that deal. He doesn't really have an ideological grounding in the way that most Republicans do on the Hill. His ideological grounding is he wants to win and he wants to make some sort of a deal. And of course, Republicans pushing back on this because it is at odds with what they want to do, which is ultimately repeal and replace Obamacare. You have seen that Trump has said over and over again they have the votes to do that. It's clear that they don't.
Yeah, they don't. All right, guys, hang on for just a moment. I need to get a quick break in here as we wait for this White House briefing. It was set to begin quite some time ago, so it really should be starting any moment now as they are on a little bit of borrowed time there at the White House. Big day, though, as they prep for this, which could be responsible for the delay. We'll have something on the president's controversial call to the widow, no doubt, of a soldier killed in Niger. The briefing in just a moment. All right, this is going to be some kind of White House briefing today because the press secretary is going to respond to what has become a very controversial call the president made to the widow of a soldier killed in Niger. I want to bring back Nia and Paul as well as Ed Martin. He's a former Missouri Republican Party chair. And we also have Evan McMullen with us, a former CIA officer who has been critical of President Trump, for sure to say. Paul, when you look at this as someone who represents veterans, does it strike you about just how sad it is that we are talking about this fight?
Yeah, it's absolutely terrible. It's terrible for America, it's terrible for the military, and most of all, it's terrible for this family. So, the sooner the president can move the spotlight off this issue, the better all those groups will be. I mean, this is really, a new level of politicization of Gold Star families and of the military. It's part of a trend. If you look at the Anthem and other issues, our veterans and military families and Gold Star families keep being thrust into the nastiness of Washington. And I hope the president can take a step back here, most of all, to just relieve the pressure that's on this family, Mrs. Johnson, who's got, kids and she's pregnant. I mean, dealing with things that are unimaginable. I've been around Gold Star families. This time for them is just unimaginable for anyone else. And they need support. They should be the focus of the entire country's support. And the more the president can do to drive support to that family and to get them out of the spotlight, the better they're going to be.
And Nia, you have a very much sort of a he said, she said, she said, she said going on, because the president is saying, no, I didn't say essentially, well, that's what he signed up for, to the widow and to Maisha. And then you have the mother of the slain soldier backing up the congresswoman who heard the call on speakerphone saying just that.
Yeah, and you have Trump saying, that the Congresswoman is fabricating this whole story. This is a Congresswoman who is close to that family, was kind of a mentor to Sergeant LaDavid Johnson, and so she knows that family very well. And you also have the president saying he can prove it, and that at some point the Congresswoman will come out and sort of revise her initial statement. She has since been on Twitter and says that she stands by her initial assessment and statements in terms of what the president supposedly said on that call. It's really a mess. You see that video of that woman, Maisha Johnson, laying over the flag-draped casket of her husband with her little daughter there, who is in sort of a daze, right? I mean, she probably doesn't essentially fully understand what is going on, that she'll never see her father again, and you just mourn and grieve for that poor family that is dealing with this and now is in the glare of the national media and having this back and forth with the president. The president, when he was in that meeting, when he's going back and forth there with the Congresswoman, should have used that opportunity to quash this and essentially say, again, the nation mourns with you. Johnson family, we are sorry for your loss. We will be there to support you. But again, he wants to go back and forth with this Congresswoman, Representative Wilson. So again, we hope, I think today in this presser, the press secretary, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, will have an opportunity to move beyond this, and we hope that they do this for the good of that family.
Ed, you have supported President Trump.
You bet, yeah.
What do you think about what the president's doing here?
Yeah, Brianna, I mean, I think that these are sacred moments. Paul referred to this. These are moments that are unlike anything that we've ever seen, God willing. Maybe some of us have, when someone loses a spouse, a husband. If you read the president's comments at Heritage Foundation last night, he referred to a guy who was a 22-year-old cop in Vegas, and he said the phrase to Trump, to the president, I signed up for this to run towards defending the good against
but Ed,
the evil.
He's wait a second.
Let me finish. No, wait, let me finish. And the despicable conduct of this Congresswoman to politicize this moment, no matter what the president said, imperfectly or not, the fact is that now the Congresswoman is saying, I heard part of the thing on speakerphone. I tried to get the phone away. She took this and wanted to fight. She's a small-time Congresswoman from Florida. Nobody ever heard of her, and she wanted to fight with the president. Now, do I wish that the president had said, go away, this is sacred time? Yeah, kind of do. But you know what? We're having this Kelly about his son. We know that now. That's factual. I wish the president hadn't said never called.
And Trump hasn't called all of the soldiers' families who died.
But that's what he conceded. And so we're making a political problem out of something sacred. No, well, he did. He's done it now. I mean,
there are two women who lost their husbands in August who did not get a call or a letter from President Trump, and CNN has verified that. Paul, can you respond to what you just heard from Ed?
This whole scorekeeping piece is just disgusting, like for America.
I agree.
Like everyone's sick of this. Everyone's disgusted by it. Like the people who need space are the families. The Gold Star families say they want space. They need that space. They deserve that space. And the president can set a tone. He is the commander-in-chief. There's an opportunity for him to do it right now in this press conference. On any day, he can take us out of this fray. He can move it up. We can move on to other things. And that's what we need from the commander-in-chief right now.
Evan, what do you think?
Well, I think I'm going to surprise Ed and others by giving a little bit of credit to his argument, which is it is possible to make a statement about someone's sacrifice in service, knowing that they were signing up to do something that was very difficult and may cost them their lives. The problem here is that the president is a transactional person. He brings that from the business world where it makes more sense. But the problem is that in this world, in the world of service to one's country, especially in combat, you don't make those decisions. You don't decide to serve in a transactional way because there's no transaction that makes sense for your life in that way. You have to do it only because you're motivated by an aspirational reason to serve the country for something bigger and higher than yourself. And I think that's where there's a disconnect between President Trump and the families who have sacrificed and the soldiers themselves. And it's one that is a stylistic difference, but one that ends up having an impact. Because if you're overseas now and you're in battle and you're hearing bullets rip the air past your head and rockets land around you, you want to know that the president understands that that you have made a decision to serve something higher than yourself, to serve the country. It's not just, a transactional arrangement that you have for which no sympathy is deserved when something bad happens.
But Evan, nobody said there was no sympathy. Brianna, I mean, look, in the military right now, I think if you went and polled the military, morale is up. I mean, General Mattis is leading well. Again, a congresswoman is saying it wasn't done well enough. She seems pretty fired up about it. I think we need to make a little space, and I like what Paul said. Try to pull it back on this and give more space for
morale. If I may,
you mentioned morale, sir.
Sorry, go on, Paul.
No, you mentioned morale. I think we can all agree this is bad for morale. When you're overseas and you see the country ripping itself apart and we don't have leadership that can pull us out of it, that's bad for morale. So the longer this goes on, the worse it is for morale, the worse it is for the morale of the veterans here at home, for our political dialogue. That's why we need leadership to move past this.
But Ed, I don't know if you can just hang this on the Congresswoman, because the mother of this slain soldier, if I may, the mother of this slain soldier said that President Trump did disrespect my son.
Right. Okay. Do you want to know the answer? The Congresswoman led this out into the public and went and sought a major fight.
So
now,
you're
maybe
saying
she was
it's okay as long as he as long as she feels privately that he disrespects.
If you're going to ask me a question, let me finish the answer. Here's what she did. She said, I'm going to make it into a big deal. And then the mother backed her up on that. The mother didn't hear the call. We haven't heard from the wife. This is all sacred
So the mother
space.
was there. She heard the call. And we're going to discuss this as we get a reaction from the White House, of course. We expect they're going to get a lot of questions in this briefing. Let's listen.
As much as I've missed you. As many of you will recall, one of President Trump's core campaign promises was to defeat ISIS. With the stunning fall of Mosul in June, and now with ISIS nearly eradicated from Raqqa, it is clear that ISIS's so-called caliphate is crumbling across Iraq and Syria. This imminent victory by the global coalition and our brave service members comes at a high cost, particularly to the Syrian Democratic Forces, who suffered many casualties as they fought to liberate their own country from the oppression of ISIS. Instead of caring for the urgent humanitarian needs of Raqqa's residents, ISIS utilized the money it stockpiled to finance terrorist attacks across the world, including against many Muslims. As coalition and our partner forces closed in around them, ISIS used civilians as human shields and killed those who attempted to flee. ISIS barbaric acts have left many scars across the region, and we remain committed to supporting stabilization efforts and local security forces in liberated areas through a political transition in Syria. Unfortunately, the Syrian regime and its supporters hindered the efforts to liberate Raqqa. Instead of focusing on fighting ISIS, the pro-regime forces attacked our partners and attempted to block them from liberating the Syrian people from the brutality of ISIS. While we know ISIS and its destructive ideology will remain a threat, the liberation of Raqqa will mark the beginning of a new phase in the Syrian conflict. As we and our partners take away the ability of ISIS to plot and carry out attacks from territory they control, we will continue to seek the de-escalation of violence in other battlefields across Syria. Looking ahead to tomorrow, we will be welcoming Governor Rosello of Puerto Rico to the White House to talk about the ongoing recovery and rebuilding efforts. We will continue working hand in hand with local leaders in all areas of our country that have been impacted by several natural disasters in recent months. As President Trump has repeatedly said, we stand with our fellow citizens. We're here to help and get them back on their feet. And with that, I will take your questions. Quiet. John.
Sarah, the president said earlier today that he would not allow insurance companies to pad their pockets with money from the federal government. The White House has some concerns about the Alexander Murray bill. Can you articulate what those concerns are?
Look, we've said all along that we want something that doesn't just bail out the insurance companies, but actually provides relief for all Americans. And this bill doesn't address that fact. So we want to make sure that that's taken care of. We think that this is a good step in the right direction. This president certainly supports Republicans and Democrats coming to work together, but it's not a full approach, and we need something to go a little bit further to get on
Can you
board.
articulate specifically what the White House is concerned about?
Some of the things that the
something
president,
about outreach dollars and making sure that the money doesn't go to insurance.
some of the things that the president has stated before, he wants to lower premiums, he wants to provide greater flexibility, he wants to drive competition, he likes the idea of block grants to states. Those are a lot of the ideas that he'd like to see in a health care plan.
Thanks, Sarah. Let's go to the president's tweet this morning, if we can. What proof does President Trump have when he says Congresswoman Wilson is not telling the truth? Are there recordings of his phone call with Maisha Johnson?
No, but there were several people in the room from the administration that were on the call, including the Chief of Staff, General John Kelly.
The president also said that he has called every family of someone who's died. Is that true?
The president's made contact with all of the families that have been presented to him through the White House military office.
There have been families that have since come forward in this to the Associated Press. The names are in these reports who say they've not actually heard from this White House in any capacity.
All of the individuals that the president has been presented with through the proper protocol have been contacted through that process. Jeff?
Sarah, just to follow up on the healthcare question, is it correct then to say that President Trump does not support this deal in its current form?
Correct.
And
I think he stated that pretty clearly today.
And then just as a follow-up on another issue, he had a conversation today with Governor Reynolds of Iowa. Can you tell us a little bit about what they discussed, and did he make any assurances about the renewable fuel standard during that discussion?
They didn't make any assurances on that specific issue. It was discussed, and they're going to continue to look at that process, but no definitive decision was made on RFS on today's call, but it was discussed. Justin?
Today, Secretary of Mnuchin was talking about the tax framework, and he said it was, quote, very hard not to give tax cuts to the wealthy as part of a framework that cuts rates across the board. It seems like an acknowledgement of the realities of math and sort of the independent analysis of the president's tax plan, but as recently as a month ago, the president said that this plan would not benefit the wealthy.
That's not the focus of the tax plan. The focus, as we've said time and time again, the focus and the priority of the framework that the White House has laid out is to benefit the middle class, and that's
would agree
what the
with
priority
Secretary
is.
Mnuchin then
That there may be some people that receive tax cuts that are also in the wealthy bracket, yes, but the fact is the priority again remains that middle class Americans are the ones that are most impacted, and that's where the priority and the focus lies.
Sarah, what is the criteria that the White House military office uses for presenting names of families to the president after they've been casualties of combat?
So there's a process that is a standard protocol. Once a person is killed in action, the first steps, the process begins with a DOD casualty assistance officer making next of kin notifications. After that, they create a package that's sent to the White House military office. That package is then reconfirmed. All of the details and the contents of the package have to be confirmed by the White House military office. Once that process is completed, the president or other members of the administration can engage in contact.
Just to follow up on that, so are you saying that if the president hasn't contacted the family members of every service member who's been a casualty since he came to office, it's because of the protocols of that office?
That's my understanding. If there's a specific case, I'd have to look into it, but as a whole, and generally speaking, that's my understanding.
And just to follow up on this week, why did the president wait 12 days to speak publicly about the...
As I just said, I walked you through that process. So the DOD package that was sent to the White House arrived on Thursday of last week. The White House military office confirmed the contents of that package on Monday, and the letters had been drafted over the weekend. They were sent once that confirmation was completed, and calls were scheduled on Monday to be made on Tuesday.
But I wasn't just asking about the family, asking about why he didn't make public remarks.
About contact. Is the president satisfied he has learned everything he wants to know about the situation itself in Niger? Pentagon sources described it as what was interpreted to be initially as a low-risk mission. The ambush was a big surprise. There was no air cover. 30 minutes for French air cover to arrive. Questions about the speed of the evacuation and having perhaps that something to do with whether or not these military personnel survived or not. Is the president satisfied he knows everything he needs to know about this particular raid, rules of engagement, and everything about it.
I believe they're still looking into the details of that, but I don't think that the president can ever be satisfied when there's loss of life from men and women in the uniform.
Is there anything he wants to know more about this than he's learned so far?
I can't get into the specifics in terms of right. I can't get into the specifics of the details of the raid at this point. But again, I don't think you can ever use the word satisfied with the process when there's a loss of life for someone in the military. Deborah, I'll come back. You got time, Deborah?
I have a Las Vegas question. Is the administration looking at having the ATF ban bump stocks, or does the president think that Congress should do it?
We're certainly still looking into and having a review done of that process, and when there's an official policy position, I'll make that announcement. John?
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. Two questions. When the Alexander Murray bill came up at the scrum in the Rose Garden Monday, there were questions about whether it would contain federal funding for abortions, and these concerns have been raised by several pro-life lawmakers on Capitol Hill. Will the president rule out signing any kind of measure that includes funding for abortion?
The president stated that he would like to see a health care bill that does not include funding for abortion.
Will he rule out signing one that does?
I believe that that is probably something that would be a priority for him, but in terms of negotiating what that health care package would look like, I'm not going to do that from the podium today.
Second question.
Hold on, I'm going to try to take one question a day to get to everybody. John Decker.
Thank you, Sarah. A question about the NFL. Roger Goodell, the commissioner of the NFL, earlier today said that all players should stand during the playing of the national anthem. Earlier this week, there was no change in policy as it relates to the NFL mandating that all players in the NFL stand for the national anthem. Does the president believe that he's winning this argument or has won this argument as it relates to what he said about whether players should